apologize to everybody bringing it in at 7 o'clock instead of the normal workshop at 5:30. We were trying to be sensitive to what we thought might be many people coming. I hope it worked out for the two of you gentlemen. Yeah. Big plans. Did you really? Oh, really? I don't think no, he was not. Okay. He's fine. My sister also
Paul, are you going to talk at all? Are you going to talk? Because that mic's not plugged in.
I don't think I might talk.
Only if they ask.
It's a possibility. Only the questions.
Do you want to do this?
Oh, don't, come on. Can I do this?
I can put it this way.
God's sakes.
This is why I say you got to.
Just show me how to do that.
I thought you were calling for the presentation, so I forgot to send it out, so then I was like, God, send it out, and it was like, oh.
How's it sound over there, Paul?
Testing.
1, 2.
Yeah, it works.
Well, what do you say, Karen?
Okay, go ahead.
All right. And, okay, we're on, and welcome everybody to the February 9th, 2023 Webster Town Board Workshop. Only one agenda item tonight, and that is a presentation followed by a little dialogue, question and answer on the proposed new highway facility. So I'm going to hand the baton off to Pat Stevens, our highway superintendent, to start the show.
Thank you, Tom. Thanks for everybody being here tonight. It's great to be here back talking about the proposed highway project, now highway facility that's greatly needed for an upgraded facility. So I'm joined here tonight by Mary Harrington, town engineer, Paul Chatfield, representing our design team at MRB Group, and Jared Miller with Campus Construction, who's helping with our construction management of the project, including a lot of the budgetary numbers we're going to be presenting tonight. The first couple of slides that go through the process of developing a budget like this, I'm going to hand off to Mary Harrington, who's helped a lot with that process.
Yes, so just a project update of where we stand right now. The design for the facility is at 50% complete. We completed the seeker recently at the town board meetings around December, so we found that there was no significant impact of the project and a negative declaration was determined. We'll be doing the bonding resolution at an upcoming meeting, hence the presentation tonight. The construction documents we are preparing for June 2023, so just about 4 months away. We would like to advertise this project for bid. And then by the time that bid phase goes out for public bid and we receive them and are able to award, we're hoping to break ground in August of 2023. And the construction's estimated to take 18 to 24 months, so it looks like the building would be occupiable in 2025.
So I'll comment on that a little bit. That end date of occupy in 2025 is kind of a critical one. We've been here doing presentations on the existing condition of the building and things of that nature. So understand that as we're working through this process, it's going to be 2 to 2.5 years from say now to when we would get into this. It's significant in what could happen to the existing building in that time period. It's a long ways out, so we're really trying to be ahead of this so we can be as efficient as possible with the budget. But it is a very long construction process to build this facility, so that's the biggest thing I wanted to reiterate.
So as we get ready to look at the budget, there's obviously a process to getting to this proposed budget we're bringing to you tonight. Even before we get to the initial scope, we started with MRB back in 2022, and we did the conceptual design, which kind of narrowed in on the size of the building and the things that need to happen to the site as a whole. So we were able to hone in on that, and now that we're at 50% design, we've identified all of the needed site and building improvements, and we start out with the idea that everything is going to be constructed by contractors. We then go to the budget review phase. So the design drawings that MRB prepared are then looked at by campus. Every item is quantified, and they put a number to each thing, and we have an initial budget. And we're also at that point looking at bid alternates to see if there are any cuts that are needed to the project, or how can we make this more palatable to keep the taxpayers in mind. So we look at all those items. Now we're at the rescope phase. So we look at things that could potentially be phased out. Again, everything that was budgeted in this budget review is something that's needed, but we look to see if it's a phase out or something that can be self-performed and utilize the talents of our highway department. And then we also refined the incidental budget, which is things like the consultant fees, the legal fees, bonding fees, furniture and equipment that needs to go into the building. And then we come to the number that we have today. So this is our proposed budget. This is the number that we're looking to bond. It's the capital project scope. So it's what we initially started out with at the top of this chart, and then we look to subtract out the self-performance items, the bid alternate, and the revised incidental costs. And just for everyone at home, I know we throw around the word scope a lot to kind of define that. It's the list of construction activities that are to be completed as part of the project. So it kind of encompasses everything that makes up the project as a whole.
Okay. Thank you, Mary. So I'm going to start by going through an overview of the scope, the items that are included in this construction activity. As we have looked at them, the first list here is what Mary talked about when we first looked at the onset. What improvements does the site need to be fully functional and function as efficiently as possible for all the services the highway department provides? In this section, I broke it down into 2 geographical areas or 2 physical areas. There's the northern yard. The northern yard is on the 8 acres that was recently acquired. That area, given it is the closest piece of the property to a residential zone, will be a stone surface space with a small paved area for some public outreach activities, and it will have a stormwater facility that will be used to store static materials, pipe, stone, things of that nature. The improvements at the existing facility, which will be the 19 acres located toward the bottom of the site plan there where the existing buildings currently are, needs a new building with truck and equipment storage, a new equipment maintenance area, new staff facilities, administrative space. We need utility upgrades for the Cliff Jones building and the construction of a new salt storage building. We also would need to update communication or utility lines from the current fuel station and the cell towers that have utilities running to them. Next slide is a breakdown of a couple of those areas with a little bit more detail. The northern yard consists of construction of new access points to the existing lot, installation of a stone surface in the yard for material storage, the paved lot for resident pickup and drop off, primarily leaf compost mulch that we do in the spring, chip seal stone, and tree drop off, Christmas tree drop off that we do seasonally. construction of a new stormwater management facility to control the stormwater runoff from the site. On the existing lot, the main building consists of a 81,753 square foot clear span pre-engineered building. It is sized to store 30 trucks and house 50 employees comfortably, with locker rooms, break rooms, and a conference room, as well as administrative offices. At the Cliff Jones building, we need new utility services for gas and electric. The Cliff Jones building, like several of our buildings, consists of several different additions, which has created some inconsistency and inefficiencies with those utilities, so we would wrap them up so there's one service for that building and not multiple, representing the multiple additions that have been put on it over the years to accommodate the department's growth. The fuel island will be rerouting of the control system to the new building. It currently goes into the existing building. We're not proposing any other upgrades to the fuel station. That will stay as is in its location, as it still has some years of useful life in it, so we'll just relocate the controls. The salt barn will be a new wood frame structure with concrete push walls and lean-to storage for the salters. The new barn would have increased capacity that would better serve the department and the residents with a larger capacity, again, based on the growth of the town. It would have some freeboard for future development. The size of the building mentioned above, the 30 trucks and 50 employees. At one point, we had a much larger building. We did a lot of analysis to make sure this was sized properly. This size accommodates what we have now and does have room for some percentage of growth based on those projections out for the town, so that this building can serve the town for 50 to 70 years, which is its expected life. So we'll see two sets of numbers tonight. The first set of numbers reflects the initial budget. As Mary talked about, we go through, we take all of the things that are involved in the project, and we developed a proposed budget for them. Then the second set of numbers that you'll see is what we're actually proposing at this time. It will reflect our bid alternates and scope reduction that we've worked on to try to eliminate anything that wouldn't be logistically impactful to the building, is how I'll put it. So anything that we reduce in scope, we feel that the building can function and serve the town without those things, at least at the initial onset. So if we can reduce those dollars in this budget, we are doing that. So the initial project budget consists of the new building at $24,726,000. The Cliff Jones utility upgrade is $276,325. The salt barn reconstruction and expansion is valued at $1.7 million, $21,206. Our project incidentals, like consulting fees, legal fees, FF&E, and the initial budget was carried at $5,612,000, and a project contingency of 5%, which equates to $1,337,868 for a total initial project budget based on the scope we identified originally of $33,674,277. So the next phase we go to is, as I said, identifying scope reduction and bid alternates. We were able to find some significant ones that we felt we could logistically handle. So this slide shows that we will treat the salt barn as a bid alternate, which means we will bid the project with this separate, as our current budget doesn't seem to support it. If the competitive bids that come in on our contracts are lower than expected, and the salt barn can be incorporated into the project for the budget that we're proposing, then we will take advantage of that. But right now we do not feel it is, so it's going to be shown as something we're not expecting to bond eventually. Paving to self-perform. $800,000, that's the paving around the building. This would leave the driving lanes and space around the new building as stone initially, and we would work on performing the paving ourselves as budget and schedule allowed. That's valued at $800,000. The northern yard, which is a stone yard construction with ponds that our department is very familiar with installing, we're proposing to self-perform. If we have a contractor install those features, they'd be valued at $1.1 million. So we identified a total of $3,682,000 $143 in bid alternates and scope reduction via self-performance. So with those reductions, we come to our proposed budget. So this is the second set of numbers. This reflects the reductions we just showed you. Results in a lower new building budget of $22,765,196. The Cliff Jones scope stayed the same at $276,000. We were able to work closely with campus and MRB to really refine the project incidentals, to make sure that they incorporated enough money to be confident in this number, that it would take us through construction, but at the same time not leave any fat in there that would be misrepresenting the need in this budget. So that number was reduced pretty drastically to $3,683,000. And then project contingency did stay at 5%, but with the reduced construction cost, it goes down to 1.3683, which results in a total proposed budget of $28,061,174, which, given that number, to have more leeway and make sure we are comfortable with the bonding amount and we don't have to do any amendments to that, we will propose a bond of $28,250,000. The next slide outlines how that value impacts our taxpayers. All of these numbers are assuming no grants. We are going to continue to pursue as many grant opportunities as may be available. We hope that some come to fruition. If they do, all of these numbers will be reduced by whatever percentage that grant covered. But with a $28,250,000 bond over a 30-year duration and an estimated interest rate of between 4 and 5.25%, it would result in a rate increase of approximately 50 cents per $1,000 of assessed value of your property or home, for an average annual impact to a typical Webster home, which is the average value of $100 per year to the taxpayers for this particular project. A few other things to consider. We do have quite a lot of project efficiencies that many other projects throughout the region have not been able to realize. By building the facility on a portion of property we already own, we will not have to temporarily relocate. As long as the building stays in the condition it is for the 3 years it will take, we won't have to do a temporary relocation. Temporary relocation cost is right about in this range from what I can tell. We don't have a specific breakdown of this, but we're estimating it would be a $2 million savings. Property purchase, we're not going out to purchase a brand new piece of property in order to encompass this expanded facility that's needed to efficiently house our equipment and staff. So a piece of property these days of this size could be up in the $1 million range. Operational distinctions for the highway department. A lot of these presentations include revenue sources and things of that nature. This project will not yield new revenue sources, but I wanted to reiterate that via intermunicipal agreements, some for snow and ice removal and others for roadway maintenance with Monroe County DOT and New York State DOT, every year in the taxable budget or within the budget calculations for the department, there's reimbursables from those entities for performing services for them, primarily in the town of Webster. Those values are an average over the 20 or 30 years they've been going on of $800,000 to $1 million a year. So that's seen as basically reduces your year-over-year taxes each year by that amount because we're performing services for entities that reimburse us. If we were to have the same staff, equipment, budget that we have now, which we would need to, without those revenues, the taxes that you would be charged would be increased by that amount. So that's been a year-over-year saving that's already been realized. It just doesn't go into one big pot that stays there. It's taken as a reduction in taxes annually. And then the other thing to consider that we couldn't really put a price tag to would be that we stay in our fully functional facility throughout construction. which means we don't anticipate any disruption whatsoever to the services provided to our residents during this construction, which is a very, very important thing for all of us, and a very fortunate thing for the situation we have that many, many towns cannot facilitate as they upgrade their facilities. So this is a slide of a piece that was put together by Karen about some of the outreach we're doing about the project and the need for the upgraded facility. We are still running tours of the existing highway facility. Those are going pretty well, but we would really love to have feedback. We've already had some great feedback by people coming through. The number of people we wish was higher. We've, even up until today, got some feedback about different things. Some of the common things that are coming up are sustainability design, things like solar panels, things of that nature. We would love to do something like that. You know, any part of these projects that it makes sense and there can be a cost savings, which we're going to definitely consider. We don't have any specific items of that nature planned at this time, but we are definitely going to consider them and look into them, and if they make sense financially in any way, shape, or form, we will definitely incorporate them whenever we can. Another common question that is coming up during these the tours that I've been giving, which are very educational, is the question of if this isn't bonded, what could you do to the building now to continue it on? So with that, it was actually covered in the conceptual plan that MRB did. However, in order to retrofit the existing building to accommodate the staff that we have, the equipment that we have, and fix the structural issues that it has, the cost to put those things into our existing building would be the same or more. So if you were to renovate the existing building, you'd have a temporary relocation, which would be added to it, and the expansion that would be needed to incorporate our staff and redo the foundations, it ends up being, in my opinion, I believe, very, very close to the same as building a new building. It may even do some efficiencies. It's just undersized across the board, so that type of expansion really isn't going to be a savings. So that is why the replacement has been recommended throughout these presentations. So that is the information on the budget that I have to present. I'll give you the rendering that was created by MRB of the front-facing portion of the building. You can see the existing Cliff Jones building in the background, which will stay, which I didn't touch on in here, but having that facility be able to stay is a major asset. It just doesn't reduce the cost of this building, unfortunately. So at this point, we're open to any questions or happy to listen to any comments.
I know that, thank you for the presentation, Pat. You guys have been very informative from day one on the need for the new highway building. And I don't think anyone on the board that has seen the pictures would disagree with that. Obviously, we have some major projects going on in the town of Webster, and the timing could not be worse from an economic standpoint and from the number of projects we have going on. And one of the questions that you had touched on that I had was regarding grants. And I know that you said that you would be looking to apply for any grants that may be available. I've never heard of grants being available for this type of building, just out of ignorance. But I don't know, given the massive amounts of money that are coming into the economy from the federal government for infrastructure, I don't know if you've had an opportunity or anybody from campuses looked into that infrastructure bill to see if any monies would be available, grant monies would be available for a project of this type. Because that's going to be instrumental in reducing the cost of taxpayers.
It's huge in any of these projects. You mentioned there's several going on, which is incredibly unfortunate. We have worked with our consultants to see what is out there. You're correct. Historically, the outlook for that is not great. But the key is that that area is changing so much.
Right.
And so fast. So we're continuing that effort, and we do hope that we find something in there. We haven't currently found any avenues that we feel are particularly promising, but just, it seems like constantly these bills are coming out, the wording in them leaves them open to some interpretation. We'll certainly be working toward anything that even seems close to try to get this type of thing going, and we are utilizing our consultants pretty heavily. If we find an opportunity to get somebody that maybe is even more specific into this, or somebody that is really hammering some of these new bills that not everybody is up to speed on, we're definitely going to try to take advantage of that. It's absolutely critical and key, but this type of building is a challenge, a real challenge to find them. So we're going to continue to work throughout the entire process that we're going through here to find those if they're out there.
You know, it really I wouldn't have an issue with, looking to talk to a professional grant writer consultant. I don't know if this is in your wheelhouse with campus construction, but if it's not, I think it'd be well worth at least having discussions about that, because if they are out there, sometimes it takes a professional that, that's their laser focused on that. If we could benefit from that, it'd be more than willing to have that discussion.
That would be fantastic. So far, with the teams that are out there looking historically, like I said, there isn't really a lot of options. It would have to be something new that came to light.
Right, that's why I brought up the $1.7 trillion infrastructure bill. I don't know if there's anything in the language of that bill that's probably 4,000 pages that was passed overnight that nobody had an opportunity to read. Hopefully, between then and now, some people have had an opportunity to read that, and maybe there is the availability in that infrastructure bill for grant monies for this type of construction.
And John, you may be saying the same thing because they've been branded differently. But we met with one of Senator Gillibrand's aides when we were getting a letter of recommendation for the WIA grant for the sewer plant back in September. And he said, and I'm paraphrasing, that inflation reduction program, which I think is different. Is that correct, Paul? It's different from that $1.7 trillion thing that John just said.
Yeah.
It's hard to track, isn't it? I mean, really. He said, and it just made my eyes perk up when he said it. He goes, they branded it that way to get it through, but if you really look in all those pages, there is infrastructure money there that you would be very surprised at. I think the other thing is it's a great presentation you guys did. In between the lines in the last year, because Pat, this is probably the 5th or 6th time you've been here presenting and talking about that. We took a long, hard look at this, doing an energy performance contract under Article 9, because that's what we're doing with the sewer plant. Ultimately, it doesn't have the same energy savings and revenue production. So reluctantly, I'll say, we couldn't go down that path. Even though it has some potential for some things that are tag lines of energy efficiencies and all that. How you tie those in to these state and federal programs, John, I know you and I have talked about this before. Whether you think it's great the state is printing money and the federal government's printing money like candy, or you don't think it's great, we sit on this board, they've done it, we have to go and get it for the town of Webster. That's our job. We didn't make a decision to print the money at the state level and the federal level, but it's there, and we owe that effort to our 46,000 citizens. It's as simple as that. And some of that is going to be, as I've learned over the last couple of years, getting educated from people like Bill Abbott, who's helped tremendously on this. Other people here, your chances of getting grants are better when you're shovel ready, as they call it, which is an interesting term. We are going to have to look at, a couple months ago we looked at becoming a climate smart community. We decided at that time not to do it. I think we might revisit that because I think there might be some money tied into grants that might tie into this program. So I know this, John, when you say a professional grant writer, we've had several meetings, and I know Mary, you've been in that, and, you know, it's a three-pronged effort we're gonna be doing. We need to have the best way to find these monies, then we have to have the best way to apply for these funds. And we know from a couple projects in the last year, that a couple grants that we've received, the $300,000 or $285,000 for the 28 acres on Herman Road. Before we applied for that, people said, "Oh, you'll never get it. You'll never get it." We got it.
You can't,
So,
yeah, you have to at least make that.
Right.
Right?
you know, I don't want to have us swinging at windmills. I aged myself with Dr. Voting there, didn't I, Chairman? But I think there's opportunities, and we need to give the effort to get those opportunities because it's a big nut. $28 million. So,
Well, anyway, yeah, and to that point, and Pat and Mary probably weigh in on this because I'm really ignorant when it comes to what road do we go down to find these grants. I have no idea, but if you guys have suggestions or people that I could call, or Tom could call, we could bring a team together to brainstorm, just, you know, be more than willing to help.
Yeah, like I said, we've already actually collaborated with MRB a little bit. I don't know if you want to
Sure.
say anything about that.
So we have a grants writing department, grant administration department that's looking for grants and writing grants all the time. So we did have a meeting a couple weeks back with the team, Pat and Mary and the team. And we've identified some potentials. And part of the problem is that there are potentials and then there are likelihoods of whether we think they'll get funded or not. So we've identified some things. We've identified some grants that we certainly do not feel would be potential success and other ones that may. But this infrastructure bill is interesting, but you know, it might be 4,000 pages of information, but there's very little directed at this point to how do you apply, what is it used for, which department within the federal government is going to take care of administering it on their end. So it sounded good last night or the night before with you know, with the state of the nation, but as far as the rubber hitting the road, they're just not quite there yet.
So after the bill is signed, there's a process before it filters down to the states from an administration standpoint. Is that
Correct.
I understand what
Yep.
you're saying?
It could be administered by the feds, or it could be passed down to the
Passed down to the
states,
states.
and that decision hasn't been made. But I'll just tell you a couple things that, you know, we've been working with the team on, especially related to ways of trying to reduce costs, in that, you know, we talk about sustainability, you know, these buildings that we design these days are already such high efficiency buildings that, you know, there should be some reduction in energy costs, although, you know, we're going with maybe a bigger square footage, the energy efficiency of the project is going to be much better. Better lighting, LED lighting, lower costs on that. Windows that are going to be, you know, provide natural light, which is going to make it not just more efficient, but easier and better for the staff when they're working on the equipment. Low flow fixtures, you know, insulation, higher insulation. So these are all things that are, you know, are being considered, and most of it is related to the, you know, to the newest building code. So, you know, it's all good, positive stuff. And
Yeah, and it's going to reduce the you know, the annual cost of running the building, without a doubt.
Right.
Right, so, but at the end of the day, we're still looking at multi-millions of dollars to build this building, which undoubtedly it has to be done. Like I said, I don't mean to be redundant, but it's just a shame that we have, you know, these major projects going on at the same time. And why I just feel that it's very, very important to see if we can get some money from the state or federal government. I mean, I think that's very, very important, especially to our residents from the tax line.
Yeah, we're gonna continue looking for that and meet with our grants team, working with Pat and Mary.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Sure.
Jenny?
Well, I just want to thank Pat and Mary for the personal tour. We did it last Friday, it was wonderful. And, really, John was saying, I want to reiterate too, that you mentioned that try to look into grants. So this way it would help our, constituents with this kind of project. And, like I said, we have to get it done. And we thank you so much that your department even went outside of our community to help other communities, our neighbors, which is very important too. So we do need, this kind of improvement for now and for the future.
I referenced earlier that I've learned a lot in the last 3 years when I said the Councilman Abbott, being an engineer by trade, has helped in that. He's worked with all the people on that side of the table the last 13 months plus on this. When you saw the presentation, the original budget, and I guess this is the way the industry works, the soft costs, the consultants, this and that, you throw a percentage out there. That percentage in the original budget, 20% or whatever, ended up being $5.6 million. And Bill, I gotta give you a lot of credit. I mean, you were right from the beginning. We're gonna have to sharpen the pencil. We're gonna work on that. I know that you were in a lot of meetings with Pat, Mary, Paul, and Jared. That got knocked down, I think, by $2 million. And some of it, there's a myriad of reasons for it. I mean, Paul, MRB has a history of designing these buildings. I don't want to minimize it, but this is, there's not too many derivations of a highway garage, most likely. I mean, it's not one of those buildings downtown that are glass and all that stuff. So that was able to, having MRB be the engineer on this, there's some economies of scale in that because of past ones that you've done. I think most recently Clarence.
Clarence
in
and
Cicero.
Cicero.
So, yeah. Our experience with Jared and campus and how they navigated the process with Sandbar Park. I've been impressed by that and how things are going with that. It's interesting that one of the things I've learned is that you take our phase 1 of our sewer plant, and it was a $12 million project. And it came in, knock on wood, it's kind of coming under budget and on time. And I guess in my world of being an accountant by trade, well, of course it should come in under budget. How could you not come in under budget? I've learned the last couple of years. That's why you got contingencies. If you don't write a tight RFP, request for bid or whatever, contractors can find holes in that and they'll find change orders. So it'll affect how they bid. I think that must have been done well on phase 1 of the sewer plant. I know the way that that's been managed has been very well. The result is we've come in under budget. I feel pretty good about the fact that this team over here, it's a gut-wrenching, it's a big number, but I don't think we're going to have those surprises as we go down the path. Because I think the request, what is it, they're going to end up being 5 different contractors, you had said, Mary?
Right, yep, there'll be 5 contracts within the project scope, site, building, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing. Yep, so it'll be a public bid, so low bidder, as long as there's no inconsistencies found within their bid, will win it, so it'll be competitive pricing for this project.
Yeah. And just in the last year, I mean, you touched on it, Pat, that it's an 81,000 square foot building. Originally, when we were in here almost a year ago, it was over 100,000 square feet, and that's because there had been this number flying around, I've heard it since I ran for office 4 years ago. Town's gonna grow to 70,000 people, and I was just like, who came up with that number? And Mary, I think it was your interns, under your direction last summer, did this study of, they took all the undeveloped land and current zoning and said, well, if they get built to the current zoning of R1 or whatever, what did they come up with, like 57,000 would be the maximum population?
That was closer to 55, yeah.
Was it down to 55? And of course, that's gonna change when you're building a building that's 50 to 70 years useful life, how big it is. So I could go on and on. It's not my presentation. There has been a lot of meetings, a lot of sharpening of pencils, I would say, Bill. A lot of things that gets us to this day when Paul and Jared and Mary and Pat can roll out and show realistically, if there are no grants obtained, how much this is going to cost. So I thank you for all the work you guys have done the last year plus to get to tonight. Bill, you brought up an interesting point when you looked earlier. When you looked at the schedule for bonding, a bond like this, and Charlie, you corroborated it. It's a supermajority. It had to be a 4-to-1 vote. So we're going to have to figure that out because of just vacations and things like that. We have I guess people like to get away from Rochester in the winter, because including yours too. We don't have too many board meetings between now and the end of March. Regular meetings and workshops where we have all 5 of us here. So we'll have to, right now it's tentatively scheduled for March 2nd. I know Patty's not here, March 2nd. We'll figure that out. Certainly, Pat, you touched on it. And I noticed that Allie and Deb are here tonight from the Highway Department. They have been the promoters. Do you feel like you're a concert promoter the last month? For these tours, I mean, we have tried in the last month. I know that approximately 2,000 of our residents have done the virtual tour. Yeah, online. We're around 40 on the in-person. I hope maybe if people watch this tonight, that was month 1. Maybe we'll get an uptick that people will be interested in going to see and do the in-person tour as we dovetail, a couple weeks from now to a decision on a bond vote.
I really hope so. The in-person experience can't be replaced. You can see it in the pictures. They're pretty telling. But to actually walk through the facility and look at some of the inefficiencies and things like that.
Yeah.
We really wish, more people come out.
It's
It's a
interesting.
great point, Pat. 'Cause I know, I saw your presentation here, and that was very impactful, right?
Right.
I don't know how many of those pictures are on your virtual tour, but when Joe Purse was here, he took me through the building, and that was like 3 or 4 years ago. Even 3 or 4 years ago, I was, I can't say exactly what I'm thinking, but it was bad. 3 to 4 years ago, it was very, very bad. So we needed the building back then, and I can just imagine, hopefully I'll be able to get out there in the next week or two to see how things have deteriorated from the last time I was there. But it was pretty impactful when I went through there 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. The in-person is very good. So it is.
In the feedback we've been getting, or I shouldn't say we, you guys have been getting, returned emails or whatever, has been relatively positive on this. I know you said a couple people that have come in, guns are slinging like this isn't going to happen, but then at the end, kind of backed off and said, yeah, let's see what you got to do here.
Yeah, the people that have come in as skeptics with concerns have actually given the nod of okay, yeah, I see, why something can't be done to this and why it's not a good use of taxpayer dollars to continue to put money into this facility given all of the conditions that just don't no longer work for the staff and equipment that we have, folks like that. Yeah, we have actually received a few emails from people that said they didn't need to see it. All the sources that are provided are fantastic, and this building is this age and this condition. I don't need to see it, it needs to be done, that type of thing, which is surprising, sight unseen. But yeah, it's been a little bit of feedback in all directions, and a lot of good questions, like I said, some of them reoccurring, other ones not. The other big thing is a lot of folks don't seem to realize how large the department is, how many trucks we have now, how many staff we have. They find themselves asking, more trucks in this room, more trucks in this, here and there. So it seems to be pretty eye-opening from that front too. Near your house, you only really get to see one of our trucks or one of our crews at any given time. But we're all over town.
And just in case, I know John Fleckinger is here tonight from the highway department. And the off chance that Barry Dean and or Joe Herbst are watching, and I know you did not, when you said that the place looked rough a couple years ago. Yes, but if you go over there and you see the additions and how you guys have thrown everything, talented tradesmen over there that built a lot of these additions and lean-tos and all that stuff, because the place was built when there was 12 of you. And there's what, 40 plus now?
Correct.
I mean, you know, and so I think you agree that how the highway department has managed it and tried to keep it going over the years, and the expansion and additions, it really shines through when you do the tour. Because you go through one door and all of a sudden you're like, wait a minute, how is, you know, well, yeah, this is an addition, and then this was an addition, and it was, but it's not really a practical way to do it going forward.
And it doesn't yield the result that's efficient that we need. And keep adding that on. Not to mention the cost. Every year that goes by, materials and everything go up. Each one of those additions gets to be more and more and more. So you're doing a smaller value addition, but you're doing it 10 times as often.
Right.
Essentially, you know, and this is sized so that we're going to do it once. And we're going to be out of the addition business.
And Paul, your microphone works, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can tell.
You, one of those slides, like that has your fingerprints all over it, and I know
Yeah.
Pat said to me earlier, how, I mean, you're a conservative accountant, I know that, I love that about working with it. How'd you come up with the 4% to 5.25% range on the bottom?
Well, I worked with our consultant, Municipal Solutions. So they worked up an amortization schedule. We've done several recently. And yeah, the range over this is a 30-year project. Because it's a fireproof building, it can go 30 years. And over the 30 years, yeah, it ranges from about 4 to about 5.25. And the annual cost for the debt service is about $1.8 million on the average. The first year you would borrow less, so it would be less the first year. But then overall, an average is about 1.8, which does work out on the average to about 50 cents per thousand.
Right.
Per homeowner. So it's a significant tax increase when you isolate it.
And John, I know you've heard me say this out loud, I've written it, you know, to what you said. We should never be doing multiple projects at the same time in this town. You know, but it is what it is. We can't go back in time and say, hey, you know, both our sewer plant and our highway garage are going to age out at the same time. Let's do the sewer plant in 2010. Let's do the highway garage circa 2025, and, you know, space it out. Unless you have a time machine, John, we can't do that.
No, we can't. But we can look forward and
Yeah.
plan ahead for 20 years, right? Take that look up
It's funny because
from where we are now.
I had a chance, I got a call today from Barry Dean, who everybody knows he ran the highway department for how long? 15 years. Employed over there for 40 probably. And he, you know, he called me and he just said, you know, I'm not going to be able to come tonight. And I said, you know, he said he'd be watching whatever, but he basically said, you know, it would be an easy move to just say, hey, we can't do this right now. Let's kick the can down the road for 5 years. Well, that's not, I mean, really, unless you found the fountain we used and you want to run again in November, you're not on the board. The board in 5 years, it just would be easy to just say, you know, kick the can, leave it to them in 5 years, so that they can kick the can. And, I mean, when does it end?
Well, unfortunately, it got kicked the can down the road many times.
Thanks,
This
Will.
building should have been done 10 years ago,
Yeah.
and it wasn't. It got pushed down, kept getting pushed off. I made it a point, before I got off this board, I wanted to get this building built. That was the reason I hung around for another 4 years, was to get this project off the ground. And I don't see any sense pushing it down the road again, because the escalation we have in here is already 10%. We could see 20 or 25% escalation. Now, instead of 28 million bond, you're looking at $33 million bond. It makes no sense.
To say nothing of the state of the building.
Right.
I'm not comfortable.
This
pushing
building's
it-
gonna
pushing
fall
it
on these
down.
guys.
Right. I'm not comfortable with that, right? And I know that the materials, or the escalation of materials over the past year, pretty significant. And I forget your name, sir, from campus. Jeremy? Jared, I'm sorry, Jared.
No problem.
So I'm sure your projects, you've seen the same thing. And, your subcontractors are coming and talking about price escalation and those sorts of things. It has been unparalleled. I know we've seen it in our business in the last year. But we recently have started seeing some de-escalation of prices. So by the time we go out to bid, hopefully some of those prices will be reflected in the bids, because the prices are starting to go down, albeit not a lot. They are coming, the trajectory is down rather than it has been the past year and a half, which is up, which is a good sign.
Yeah, and just to speak to that just very quickly, just in the middle of when we were putting together this estimate, because we reach out to vendors just to make sure our costs are consistent with marketplace current date.
Right.
We had an increase in the middle of our estimate that increased the cost of the steel building by approximately 10%.
Yes.
So that took effect at the end of January, we'll call it. So they typically see anywhere from 5 to 15%, that's it, at 10 on that building structure. So there's always increases. It's just managing to capture those increases and get the thing bid as early as possible.
Yeah, we're actually, and we did, like I said, last year and a half, and because I have to purchase studs and track and all that, and we look at different vendors, and there's a significant difference between vendors. But both of our vendors, their prices per linear foot of studs and track has absolutely come down in the past month. So if that trajectory holds true, that could be beneficial to us also from a construction standpoint.
All this fiscal policy done its job at the federal level, you think? To have that affect the agenda? I would agree.
I'm just reflecting on what we're seeing.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's,
Well, we have to do what we have to do, so if we can find something positive, and that's the trajectory, we should, and I'm sure we will, take full advantage of it. But I really appreciate the due diligence of your team, Pat and Mary, Jared and Tom, right? Oh, I'm so good with names.
that's Matt Chatfield's uncle.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Forgot about that. No, but you guys have done a great job, and Bill, your assistance and knowledge that you've offered to the team is going to be very, very beneficial to the entire town. So it's great to see this come to fruition, even though as painful as it's going to be to pay for it. I think we'll do everything we can possibly do for the taxpayers to keep the price as low as possible, in addition to searching out hopefully things that
Charlie, Bill brings up a good point that, he stayed around for 4 years and I'm gonna get this thing built. Now, if he's done at the end of the year and it's 4 months into construction, as an ex officio, can we still just say, you're still on the team, you meet with them?
Sure, we can appoint you. You can exercise your supervisor
Is that,
I'm saying it's unofficial.
I need
It's
to,
not official. It's not an official. It's not like that.
Hard take.
well, and Bill, look at the bright side, at least I'm not trying to make it the chair of the comprehensive plan.
That's not
This would be more, you know, no, you know what, and we'll figure out from here, and I don't, certainly if there's more questions and talk to the heavy head, fine, but, you know, now, there it is, and it'll go up on the website tomorrow. Karen will have it out there on the website. This video and audio of this will be, end up being about an hour presentation, will be there for people to see. We are going to continue to promote tours and virtual tours, because I would like to think between now and when we come up with when the bond vote will be, which it would be within the month, as we figure out how to do that, and make sure, you really want 5 people there for it, but we'll see. Or, you know, it's got to be a super majority, as well it should, when you're talking about 20 million. And I will say this, it'll be very easy for somebody to sit there at home, and I would have said the same thing 4 years ago, before I got into this. Isn't this something that we should put out to the town and do a referendum and have everybody vote on it? Well, the reality is, you know, we're a representative republic. You vote for your town board so we can represent you and make good decisions. Correct me if I'm wrong, Charlie, the governor, so to speak, of that is.
You got it exactly, that's the whole point of having votes on the bond, as opposed to sending them out to referendum, so.
Is this subject to a permissive referendum?
And that's the thing, I think it would be subject to risk. So if everybody, we haven't heard anything yet.
Oh, still subject to
Anybody.
permissive
Right.
referendum.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
Right.
maybe in the next 30 days or less, we'll start to, now that the numbers out there or whatever, we'll start to hear a different take on this. But heretofore, we haven't. People have been supportive of this. They seem to understand, you know, you gotta do it. I think you guys did a great job tonight of really breaking it down. What does this mean to the typical homeowner when you're talking about that kind of bond if you don't get grants? But yeah, if the board, you know, decides that this is the best move for this community today and for the next 50 years, the citizens have levers to, if they don't agree with that. The permissive referendum is the main one. I hate to say it, proving I guess I'll never be a good politician, then vote us out of office also. I mean, you know, if you think we are not representing the community, that's the other level. I really feel as if we're representing the community the best doing this.
Well,
That's my opinion.
As Bill said, this is something probably should have been taken care of 10 years ago. And I understand the caution that they've exercised over the years. There's really no good time. You
No.
gotta do it. You better do it now. We know that there's problems that needs to be fixed. We've got the talent. We've got the homegrown talent, if you will. We've got
Yeah.
Bill and Mary. So
I gotta tell you something, and Charlie, I think the team of talent we have that will minimize risk of it ever going over budget, you know, and actually put us in a position to come under, and also because of the efforts on grants, we're showing the worst case. I really believe that. And it's always, I guess, better to show the worst case because, I don't know, coming back in a year and saying, oh, it's more than we thought, that just doesn't play well with people.
It used
Don't play well with me.
doesn't anymore. 'Cause historically, a lot of municipal projects come in over budget. And a lot of that is due to unforeseen issues, change orders, they open up the wall, they run into problems. So for the Sandbar project to be, you know, on budget and on time is testimony to people who are running that project. And for the phase 1 of the sewage treatment plant to come in on time and under budget is significant, it really is. So we clearly have a great team, Pat and Mary and the rest of our department heads. And I'll tell you what, you know, we we hired a lot, we had a lot of retirements, but, you know, we went through a process. It wasn't one person making a decision based upon, you know, his feeling and what he had heard. We had an actual panel, and I think that process that you employed has really boded well for the town of Webster and the department heads that we've hired, and we're seeing results of that. We really are.
We are, but, and I will say this, gotta give credit where credit is due. It was a great move by the previous town supervisor, Ron Nesbitt, and whether it was the board decision. The hiring Art Trone
Yes.
was a construction manager to kill two birds with one stone, to run the sewer plant, but to also manage a $12 million project. That was a great move. Because he was, with Barbara and Judas, he was actually Jared, your position. And he was a taskmaster with them, you know, and not that I think that's your relationship with MRB. And it wasn't on my watch, or that guy over there as a finance director was hired. And that's a solid, so there's been a, you know, I just kind of took over the reins of what was, I think, a pretty well-run organization. It's just amazing that, I mean, the $12 million phase one sewer, Bill, correct me if I'm wrong, and Charlie, you guys have been probably around the town, that had to be the largest project to date. I think maybe the rec center was like 7 million, 8 million, 10 years ago.
Sewer plant was
Yeah. And then you roll into this in phase two on the sewer. Yeah. Anyway. It is 7:59. Anything else that anybody wants to ask or comment? We'll, all right, we'll see what happens after tonight, and we'll tighten up. Right now, the tentative is March 2nd. I just don't want it for bond resolution. Bill brought up a great point. That's a super majority. There's only 4 people there that night. We'll figure that out. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Well, thanks for coming, everybody, and have a good night.
I'll be in the morning. I got to drop my car. Yeah, there you go. You'll be able to drive it for 2 weeks.
once, all years I've been here, this once.